Yes. This last shtickle is the Chayra Bazundri Yers HaKedesh. When you read it, it seems totally separate from before. But it says in the Mefarshim on Tanya that it's pushing an explanation of this Yers HaKedesh. Because this Yers HaKedesh explained to us the idea that in a lower level, you have only the Achirayim of the higher level. And now the Alter Rebbe gives you a Moshe from Asius. He says like this. Ha'ois and Niglas Lana, there's three types of letters. They exist in action, in speech, and in thought. What's action? Written letters. What's speech? Spoken letters. And what's thought? Thought letters. What Rebbe is going to explain that in Machshava Gufa you have these three in Yodim. The Ma'aseh in Tmunas Eisin Shebeksav Ashuri Shebesefer Torah. Action is the written letters in the Sefer Torah. The Eisis Adibur and spoken letters are Nechkakas Behevel V'Keil, are in the air and the voice. Hamischalek Lechabez Chalakam Sheinu Zeh Mizev B'Terasim, divided up into 22 separate parts in their forms. Shehi Havara, so Mifta, it's the articulation and the expression of a Chav Beis Eis, the 22 letters of Chalosh in every language. Ki in Hefresh, there's no difference in the way the sounds come out, not in the way they're written, but the way the sounds come out, Bein Lashon HaKedesh, Ubein Sha'ar L'Shenes, between Hebrew and other languages, B'Muhus Havaras Ha'esis, in the way the letters sound, Ki in B'Tiruf, and the way you put them together. Aleph is an aleph in every language. But the way you put the sounds together to create words is where there's a difference between one language and the next. Then he says, Veisis HaMachshava, and letters of thought, Hem Gam Kim B'chol Lashon, are also international, because Sha'ad Machashev Tevis Veisis HaLashon Shein Chav Beis Levad. When you're thinking, the sounds are only 22 sounds alone. So you have written letters, spoken letters, and thought letters. So Dal Rebbe weiter. Rakshab Machshava, in thought itself, Yesh, but Gimel Min B'Chir, you have three letters itself. Sharei, very simple. You could imagine Asius of Maise, you could imagine Asius of Dibur, and you could imagine Asius of Machshava. Kisharei, B'Sefer Torah Tmunas Asius, when you see the written letters in the Sefer Torah, say Mitztayres Machshavta, you imagine them in your thought. V'zeh B'Chir Nikra B'Chinas Asiyah Shab Machshava. That's Asiyah Shab Machshava. V'chein Kasha Shemei Asius Adibur. Here people speak. Hey Nirshama's Machshavta. They become written into your memory, into your thoughts. Umaharaban, you could think how people speak. That's thinking speech, which is the Bechinas Yitzira. And then there's thinking in thought alone, without using the form of spoken words. It's called thought and thought. Hey, says you have Fashidin and Levushim. In Machshava Gufa, you have Maisa Sheb Machshava, Dibur Sheb Machshava, and Machshava Sheb Machshava. And of course the point is that the Makir of Maiseh is Maiseh Sheb Machshava. In other words, the market of mitzvahs Maiseh that we do physically is the way Maiseh was in Machshava, Chitzenius of Chachma, like we discussed in the Yers HaKedesh before. When people actually speak, they get their life. When you speak, the assumption is, Alter Rebbe says, you probably thought before you spoke. Right? And he says like this, sometimes you speak and you're thinking something different. So you can't speak without thinking, unless you're using such words and such formations of letters, you spoke them before. You thought about them many times, and therefore in these words and formations of letters, it remains a trace of your thought. You thought about many times. Sometimes you speak without thinking. So if you speak something without thinking, the things you speak without thinking, you thought about so many times that you could say them without thinking. So if you could say them without thinking because you thought about them so many times, the thought is there in the spoken word. Says the Rebbe, and this explains the whole idea that you have Maiseh Sheb Machshava, which is the source of Maiseh, and Dibur Sheb Machshava, which is the source of Dibur. This is a mashal for Bechinas Acharayim and V'chitzenius. The idea of a back, in other words, Nihi Mi Patzef Elyon, the lowest level of the higher Patzef, Shenichnas Betachtem, which comes down to the lowest level, to be a neshama for it. In other words, you think in Maiseh and then you do a Maiseh. You think in Dibur and then you actually speech. And the nimshal is the Chitzenius of Chochmah is the makir of mitzvahs. And then it comes into Nihi, it translates the mitzvahs Maiseh of Mamish. Okay, Shane.